welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book Rui of the Lion, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. According to unpublished and secret chronicles, around the year 1630, there lived in the interior of Brazil a nobleman named Rui de Leão. He was a man of many talents, fluent in the native language, and connected by marriage to a Tupi family, having wed one of its most beautiful daughters. At that time, Rui de Leão was about 40 years old. He was strong, with a healthy color in his face, active, and as energetic in spirit as in body. There was, however, a hint of sadness in his expression, a sadness that often seemed to fade without ever fully disappearing. It seems this hidden sorrow had to do with misfortunes he had suffered in Portugal, which had led him to come to Brazil aboard one of the royal galleons. In any case, our nobleman, forgetting completely the pride of his lineage, did not hesitate to join in marriage to the daughter of an old shaman. I say marriage only because that is the word we use, but one should not think of it in the Christian sense. Rui de Leão's union followed the customs and ceremonies of the Tupi people. A priest named Father Pires once tried to convert the nobleman's wife and bless their union. But Rui de Leão replied that from that day forward, he was Tupi, because his wife was, and he sent the priest away. So, Tupi he remained, except for his clothing, which he kept civilized and Portuguese for a while. But even that changed a few years later, after the shaman gave him some advice. "You are our moon, you are our brother," said the shaman one day. "But there is one thing missing. The cashew is like the cashew. The coconut is like the coconut. But you, white stranger, are not like us. You wear clothes like our enemies. Why do you refuse to dress like us, with the feathers of the macaw and the colors of the jenipapo fruit?" "Shaman," answered Rui de Leão, "the skin of the white stranger is not used to the climate of your land." The shaman smiled, looked up at the sky, stuck his little finger into the corner of his left eye, and delivered a philosophical reply. "Water hits the stone and pierces it. Custom reforms nature." Rui de Leão shivered as he heard these words come from the shaman's mouth. He could not believe that the man had thought of them on his own. His father-in-law grew sad and insisted once more. After half an hour of discussion, Rui gave in. He took off his breeches, his doublet, and his shoes. A great celebration followed as the nobleman clothed himself in the garments of the wilderness. Nanavi, his wife, made him a magnificent feathered headdress, which he wore with pride and joy. There was no similarity between Rui de Leão and Julius Caesar, not in origin or in time. Yet a single detail connected these two great men. Both were as bald could be. Imagine, then, how happy the nobleman felt when he received the headdress. It was, for all intents and purposes, his own crown of laurels, just like Caesar's. That afternoon, a gathering took place in the shaman's hut. Parrot breasts, armadillo ribs, and other delicious dishes filled the bellies of the guests. As the sun began to sink and grow dim, everyone started to dance. They danced until exhaustion and wine threw them into a deep, dreamless sleep. The tribe placed immense trust in the nobleman, and he quickly grew used to the toughest challenges. There was no battle in which he did not win lasting glory, nor a feast where he did not bring along a pair of hungry jaws eager to feast. The first time he joined one of these ceremonies, the victim was a strong and handsome young native. According to tradition, an old woman easily 80 years old had spent weeks fattening him up. All the people from the nearby villages were called to attend, and Ruy de Leon was honored with the privilege of delivering the final blow. No words could describe the nobleman's joy when he was given this highest of honors. When he stepped through the doorway of the hut, holding the deadly club in one hand and wearing a necklace of human teeth around his neck, a high honor among those savage people, a murmur of admiration spread through the crowd. The only thing that bothered the desert dwellers was Ruy de Leon's nose, which was unmistakably Christian, a clear contrast to the flat noses of the native people. According to the old stories, this nasal difference almost led to a full revolt among the tribe. But the influence of the shaman and the presence of the lovely Nanavi quickly put an end to any thoughts of rebellion. Bravely, Ruy de Leon walked into the open space where the ceremony was to take place. He went straight to the platform where the victim was to be sacrificed. At once the condemned man was brought out, dragged by two strong young men. Around him walked half a dozen old men, touching his wounds, while a strange orchestra played rough variations of Rossini's tunes on flutes made from human bones. Ruy de Leon raised his club and began to hit the victim lightly, all while the crowd cheered loudly. Then, with one powerful blow, he crushed the man's skull into pieces. After that came the moment when the tribe divided the flesh of the sacrifice. Ruy de Leon got a large share, and it is said that he found it tastier than any dish he had ever eaten in the cities of the civilized world. These were the first times Ruy de Leon took part in such cannibal feasts, and from then on, he became better than anyone at them. Catching a parrot midair with an arrow, or a fish in the river shooting, with both hands and feet, was all easy for our nobleman. Since the Tupi people loved to move around and rarely stayed in one place, it wasn't long before Ruy de Leon lost the habit of building a permanent home, something so common among civilized people. It was truly something to see how quickly he could build and then take apart his hut. He got used to every part of their life. Yet, even though he adapted well, it was hard for a man from the cities to fully forget his old ways. Even though he came to like the customs of the wild, Ruy de Leon had the idea of bringing some European habits into the life of the tribe. Ruy de Leon tried everything he could. But the native people refused to change their way of life in any way, whether in politics or society. So he had to accept things as they were. Here we find our hero at the start of this story, a story that is backed by documents of undeniable truth. It was exactly the year 1632 centuries before the revolution at Campo da Aclamação, and Ruy was talking with the shaman about the last rains when Nanavi, his wife, appeared at the entrance of the hut. She brought him the happy news that he would soon become a father. Ruy had been longing for a child from his marriage to the indigenous woman. He stood up and said with joy, "Good news, Nanavi. The mango tree has not borne no fruit after all." "No," she replied gently. "Welcome then, this child who will carry your father's legacy and receive the blessing of his grandfather." "Oh no!" the shaman cried out. "When your son is born, I will already be gone." The shaman spoke with a tone that felt like prophecy. Ruy felt a chill, and without thinking, reached for the pockets of his pants only to remember he no longer wore them. Nanavi began to cry softly. But the shaman comforted the couple with a long talk about fate. He compared life to the brief glow of a firefly, a metaphor poets would later copy, and ended by asking for something to eat. He had guessed right. 2 months before the birth of the child from the noble bloodline of the Ruiz de Leão, the shaman fell seriously ill. The local healers were called. One was the great Urumbeba, a deep expert in the human body and its sicknesses. The other was Mandaj Biuruchu, no less famous, a master of plants and roots. These two stars of the jungle's academy entered the hut with a serious look that the moment demanded. They examined the sick man and said they needed to speak privately. Everyone else left the room so they could talk. When the two healers were alone, Urumbeba broke the silence. "The river is rising fast," he said. "I've noticed that too. It looks like it'll flood everything again. Just like last month. Also, I had a dream." "Oh?" "I dreamed of a huge snake spreading across the land, wrapping the whole tribe in its coils." "A snake?" Urumbeba saw that his companion didn't understand the meaning of the dream. "Yes," Urumbeba replied, "a snake. And that snake is a sign of the river that will surround all of us." Mandaj Biuruchu became deeply frightened by Urumbeba's dream. He agreed it was urgent to move their tents to higher ground. They talked for a long time about this until, after about an hour, a groan from the shaman reminded them of the main reason they had gathered. In Urumbeba's opinion, the sick man should drink a preparation made from manioc, given in 4 doses, each one in a small bowl. But Mandaj Biuruchu preferred to use cooked inimboya, given in 2 doses, along with warm compresses made from kataya leaves. Since their views were different, they needed to discuss them carefully. But the patient's condition had worsened. Ruiz de Leão came to tell the healers that the shaman was getting worse. The healers went to see the sick man and realized it was his final hour. Since the shaman was suffering greatly, they decided the best relief would be to strike him on the head, a last act of mercy among those simple people. The shaman understood what was happening. He asked to speak to his son-in-law in private. When they were alone, the shaman said, "I want to give you a gift, the greatest gift one person can give another. I received it myself from the hands of Tupã." Ruiz de Leão opened his eyes wide in surprise. "I still have life until tomorrow's sunrise. When night comes, we'll go to the clearing. I want to go with you to a secret place." Ruiz de Leão promised to follow the shaman's request. And so, when night came, the shaman leaned on his son-in-law, and 6 or 7 steps from the hut, told Ruiz de Leão to dig at a certain mound of earth. The nobleman dug, and it wasn't long before a sealed jar appeared. "This," said the shaman, "is a secret that follows me everywhere. Whenever I move from one place to another, I take the jar with me and bury it behind the hut." Ruiz de Leão stared at the jar, unable to guess what it held inside. The shaman stepped in to explain. "It was a night when I couldn't sleep, so I went to sit by the sea and look at the stars. I had been there a long time when suddenly a glowing figure appeared before me and said, 'Shaman, do you want to live forever?' 'Yes,' I answered, bowing low and kissing the earth. 'Then take this jar,' he said. 'Inside is a potion that will grant you immortality. Drink it when you wish, and you will never die.' Ruiz de Leão felt a surge of emotion. 'Ah, then drink it now, quickly.' But the shaman gently pushed his son-in-law away. 'No. If I wanted to be immortal, would I have already drunk it? I accepted the potion with joy and kept it for another time. Deep sorrows have made my life bitter. I don't want immortality anymore. But you are happy. You can be immortal. I give it to you. It is yours now. But for now, bury the jar again. No one must ever know. And so, Ruy de Leão buried the jar once more. The night was dark. An owl cried out from the top of a tree. The owl's call and the soft murmur of the river were the only sounds around them. When Ruy de Leão stood up, he saw that the shaman was trembling. He tried to hold him up, but it was too late. The old man had passed away. Great was the grief of Nanavi when she learned of her father's death. The funeral ceremony moved everyone, for the shaman's words had always been respected and loved. All knew that, with him, a great light of the Tupi people had been lost. Chapter 2. Ruy de Leão returned to the spot where the jar of the elixir had been buried. He dug it up, removed the lid, and looked carefully inside. The liquid was yellow, with hints of blue, and the sunlight hit it just right. There wasn't much of it, but for the purpose it served, that was more than enough. The smell was a mix of musk and cinnamon. The husband of Nanavi buried the jar again and sat down on a stone nearby. No one could tell how long he stayed lost in deep thought. We only know that when he finally lifted his head, there was a smile on his lips. "Illusion," he said out loud. "This is impossible. Why didn't I see right away that the shaman was just dreaming, or trying to show off his connection with Tupã? Immortality. Only God could give that, and even he certainly does not. That is the truth. Come on, Ruy de Leão. Use your good sense. Don't be foolish about this. The shaman might fool others, but not me." He stood up, took a couple of steps, and stopped, staring at the place where the precious jar lay hidden. "And yet," he said quietly, "how wonderful it would be to have immortality. To watch centuries pass one after another, to see generations come and go, to witness the rise and fall of empires, and remain above it all, to laugh at time and at people. Oh, that would truly be a great fortune. And if the shaman's elixir really..." He heard footsteps. It was Nanavi. "Are you thinking about your homeland?" the native woman asked. "My homeland is yours, Nanavi. My country is your love. What could I have there that I don't already have here? The sun is the same. The earth is the same. The air we breathe is the same. Life is the same, and death is the same too." Nanavi threw her arms around his neck, and he gently kissed her forehead. "You seem distracted. What's wrong?" "Nothing. I just miss the shaman." Poor father. Ruy de Leão sat back down on the stone. "He was a great man, your father," he said. "He was a wise man," she replied. "Yes, he was." Ruy de Leão sat quietly, his thoughts heavy after Nanavi's words. There is no one better than he at reading the skies or understanding the roots of the earth, Nanavi had said. Ruy shivered slightly, though the night was warm. Nanavi noticed. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Nothing," Ruy replied. Then he asked, "Did your father know the secrets of these roots?" "Who among the children of Tupa does not?" "You're right," Rui admitted. "Your father was wiser than all the others." But he never spoke of it. Rui fell into deep thought. "Who knows?" he said to himself. "Perhaps the shaman truly made this potion through secret knowledge, and only pretended it came from the gods." He lingered on that idea, not without admiration for the shaman's humility. In the end, Rui decided that even if the potion wouldn't grant him eternal life, it certainly wouldn't kill him either. After all, his father-in-law had no reason to harm him. 2 months later, a healthy baby boy was born, the child of the nobleman and the native woman. As was the custom, Rui took to his bed, drank the broths prepared for him, and received visitors, while his wife quietly returned to managing the home. Urumbeba visited often, not because Rui needed healing, but because he enjoyed talking and brought joy when he was in a good mood. One day, Urumbeba told Rui that a priest from Rui's homeland had arrived in the region. "A man of great presence," Urumbeba added, and with words as sweet as honey. "Where is he now?" Rui asked. "Is nearby. He was seen near the river's mouth." A few days later, the priest arrived. His name was Father Norberto, and he was traveling on mission. Someone had told him there was a man from his own country living in the village, so he came to visit. They had met before. Father Norberto spoke of Portugal and of Rui's family. He told Rui that nearly all his relatives had passed away, except for a cousin who had gone to fight in Africa. Rui listened, unmoved. "Truth is," he said, "I don't care much for news of my family, nor whether they live or not. My family now is Nanavi and my son." Just then the baby stirred and woke up. Father Norberto looked at the child of a European and an indigenous woman. He turned to Rui and said gently, "Shall we baptize him?" "No," Rui replied firmly. The friar stared at him, astonished. "You won't do it? Not even now?" "No," Rui said. "My God," the friar went on. "Is this real? Could it be true that these poor souls, born and raised without the light of faith, are easier to save than you, who grew up in the very heart of the church?" Rui had no answer. There was none. Still, he tried to argue, to twist the words, to find a way out. But the old friar just listened, silent and unmoved. When Rui finally stopped speaking, the friar looked him in the eyes and said only, "I pray that God does not punish you for this act." "I truly do." Then he turned and walked away. That very night, Rui fell into a violent fever. The next day, he worsened. Nothing helped, no root, no leaf, no remedy from the forest could ease his pain. They tried every cure they had, but nothing worked. The sickness showed every sign of being the end. 3 days passed like this, with nature fighting against what little knowledge they had. At last, they agreed. If the final cure failed, they would have no choice but to use the last and oldest medicine of all the club. Rui didn't know he had already been given up for lost, but he guessed it. The last potion they gave him, said to be the one that would save him, did nothing. He saw death standing near. He remembered the friar's words. He thought of his newborn son, of his young wife, still full of life. All of it together gave him the strength what little he had left to try one final thing. With great effort, he rose from his bed in the middle of the night. He stumbled out of the hut and nearly fainted at the door. But he did not wake anyone. Slowly, painfully, he made his way to the small hill where the jar had been buried. He dug with his bare hands, pulled it from the earth, and drank as much as he could. The next morning, he woke feeling better. The people of Nineveh's village, who had already begun preparing their bodies to carry the great foreigner to his grave, were amazed at his sudden recovery. Naturally, they believed it was the last medicine that had saved him. They had no idea what he had truly done. Rui de Leão recovered from his illness, and there was great joy because of it. The nobleman was truly the light of that people, the one they turned to for guidance in difficult times. He did not yet have full certainty that he was immortal, but he soon became sure that the elixir could cure stubborn fevers. Let us wait and see what comes next, he told himself. And so he waited. It was not long before everyone in the region began to marvel at Rui's growing strength. This was the elixir's second effect. His energy multiplied, and his activity increased, which pleased Nanavavi greatly. In those days, among those people, true honor did not come from waving a Parisian cane, but from swinging a heavy war club. As the years passed, Rui's hopes grew. Time seemed to have no power over him. Not only did the few hairs he had stay black, but new ones grew in as well. Soon, he had a full forest of hair on his head. Since combs were rare in the wilderness, this forest remained wild and untouched. Not a single wrinkle marked his face. Not once did his hand tremble. Rui was 60 years old, yet he looked exactly as he had at 40. Were these not signs of immortality? He became fully convinced that he had conquered death. But the same could not be said for poor Nanavi. One day, while she was gathering fruit in the forest, a falling tree trunk struck her on the head, and she passed away. All too suddenly, she left this world for the next. Left behind was their child, a promising young boy, the only child born of Rui and Nanavis love. Since Friar Norberto was still away on his mission, Rui met one day with another missionary and began to speak with him. Rui de Leão stood before the priest, his voice calm but firm. "I won't pretend to understand the secrets of the shaman," he said. "But I can promise you this, I have the means to bring many people to the faith over many years. I'll help the friars of your order, not only with my knowledge of the native language, but also with the respect I've earned among the people here. And to prove that I serve the church with honesty, I offer you the child of Nanavi to be baptized." The priest, Father Norberto, listened carefully. "Your actions are most welcome, Sir Rui de Leão," he replied. "I believe the church will gain much from your aid. To doubt your sincerity would not only be unfair, it would be a serious mistake. You enter the church through its sacred door, and even before that, you bring us this innocent child to be baptized and taught the ways of our faith. Where is the mother?" "She is gone," Rui answered. "It is your fault, Sir Rui de Leão," the priest said firmly. "Because of your stubbornness, one soul has been lost." Rui lowered his head. "I am truly sorry, Father Norberto," he said, kneeling before the friar. So the child was baptized and taught the first lessons of the Christian faith. Meanwhile, Rui, now given the task of guiding the native people, set out into the wilderness with Father Norberto and another friar at his side. He spent many months on this mission. The church reaped great rewards from his efforts. When the three men finally returned to the friar's shelter, there was a grand and joyful celebration in their honor, especially for Rui. The friars praised him again and again, saying that his devotion had been extraordinary and his work never-ending. Yet everyone noticed something strange. While the friars returned tired and worn from the hardships and dangers of the journey, Rui looked just as strong and healthy as when he had left. Their surprise grew even more when he revealed that he was over 60 years old. "There's no reason to be amazed," Rui said with a smile. "I've learned from these people. They often live to be 100. So Rui stayed with the friars in the convent, living among them and helping with their daily tasks. One night, a group of warriors came from the forest. They attacked the monastery with a strength and fury no one had ever seen before. The defense was almost non-existent against the fierce Indians. After a brutal and relentless battle, Rui managed to make himself heard and calm the chaos. The Indians left behind 2 of their own dead. Among the friars, 2 had died from the enemy's poisoned arrows. But to everyone's shock, Rui was struck in the back by an arrow, pulled it out, and survived unlike the others. "What kind of mystery is this, brother?" one of the friars asked him. "No mystery at all," Rui replied. "It's likely the arrow wasn't poisoned." Years passed. The friars were replaced as they died off, one by one. By the time the 1730s arrived, Rui had not lost a single trace of his strong, youthful appearance. Everyone was amazed by this extraordinary sight. There had to be something miraculous going on, people thought, because after 100 years, how could someone not show even one sign of old age? And yet, Rui's face remained exactly the same. In the year 1730, a royal officer heard about Rui's incredible youth and offered to take him to the court in Lisbon. His plan was to present Rui to King João V himself. They agreed, and they set off together. Chapter 3. It's strange that no published accounts from that time mention the arrival of this extraordinary man at the court of Lisbon, or the events that followed. Rui was never formally introduced to the king, no. One knows exactly why, but he moved through the city like a man who belonged everywhere. He appeared in the grand halls of noble families and in the homes of common craftsmen. He astonished ladies, counts, and merchants alike. He spoke of events that had happened a century earlier, as if he had lived through them himself. In short, he caused the same kind of wonder that the famous Count of Saint-Germain once caused in Paris. Though that mysterious man never claimed to have found the secret of immortality, a secret that Rui's servant had supposedly discovered. Everyone knows how much women are drawn to mystery and rarity. A lady named Beatrice, one of the most beautiful noblewomen of the time, fell in love with our Rui, and he too fell for her. But Beatrice was already promised in marriage to Dom Alvaro, the Marquis of P. When the Marquis learned of this new affection, he challenged Rui to a duel. Rui was not the kind of man to refuse a fight. He accepted the challenge without hesitation, even though he and the Marquis were equals in birth and honor. They agreed to fight with swords not far from Lisbon. Unfortunately, Rui had grown used to the bow during his years in the jungle, and had not held a sword in many years. The Marquis, however, was known to be a skilled swordsman. The fight was clearly unfair, yet Rui ignored the advice of those who urged him to practice first. The duel lasted about 20 minutes, and for Rui's second-shift companions who watched the fight it was a time of great anxiety. In the end, Dom Alvaro struck a deep wound through Rui's body. Everyone rushed to his side as he fell to the ground, covered in blood. "He's dead," they all cried. "No," Rui said weakly. "I am not dead yet." With his own hands he tried to stop the bleeding, while a physician invited especially for the occasion rushed to give him first aid. "He will die within 2 hours," the surgeon told Rui's friends sadly. But 2 hours later, there Rui was, walking the streets of Lisbon, to the great surprise of the people who had already heard of the duel and believed him dead. "You know what?" said the surgeon. "That man is the devil himself." Rui walked out into the cold, the heavy door slamming shut behind him. The world he had known was gone. Back then, a scandal like his meant exile, not just from society, but from everything: friends, home, even the churches. He watched as the grand doors of palaces, inns, and homes closed in his face. No more invitations. No more greetings. No more place for him. He gathered what little money he had left, slipped a small bottle into his coat, the last of the immortality potion, and left for Spain. There, he became someone else. He told no one his name or his age. He lived quietly, unnoticed. But even in hiding he found ways to survive. In the back rooms of gambling houses, he played, and he won again and again. Gold filled his pockets, and with it, new chances. What now? He asked himself one night, staring out over the dark streets of Seville. The answer came soon enough. He crossed into Germany and decided to study. With the gold he had won in Castile, he could afford the best teachers, the finest books, the most powerful minds of the age. Years passed, and when he finally emerged, Rui de Leon was no longer just a man. He was a phenomenon. He held doctorates in theology, philosophy, math, law, and medicine. He knew ancient languages, explored ruins, and understood the stars better than most. He could read Latin, Greek, Arabic, Armenian, Turkish, and Hebrew. He translated the works of St. Augustine and St. Thomas. He founded schools and wrote books that scholars could not ignore. He wrote about the lives of martyrs, studied the Acts of the Apostles, and discovered ancient treasures in Rome. He even predicted the return of 2 comets, shocking the scientific world. People whispered his name with awe. How could one man know so much? How could he remember events from centuries ago, as if he had seen them himself? Of course, they were close to the truth, but not close enough. Thanks to his wealth, Rui married a noblewoman from Spain, a woman with titles stacked like coins, 5 times a marchioness, and rich beyond need. Their life together was short. She died just 2 years later. It was the deepest wound he ever felt. Even with her fortune now his, the pain did not fade. So he returned to his books, his labs, his thoughts. And this time, he studied harder than ever before. Rui had once been a celebrated figure in the world of science. Scholars admired him. Academies praised him. He had become almost untouchable, like someone who could never be wrong. But despite all that respect, he felt a deep sadness inside. He was nearly 200 years old, and life had become heavy. The world had nothing new to offer him. Science, which once thrilled him, now seemed dull. The thrill was gone. And so, the immortal man began to wish for death. But death would not come. How could he find it? Rui thought of ending his own life. He knew it was a sin, something wrong in the eyes of both God and people. Still, he saw no other way. At the time, he was in Lisbon. Many who had known him before were now gone, so no one recognized him. He used a different name to stay hidden. He made up his mind. He wanted it all to end. He went to the river Tagus and jumped into the water. He picked a moment when no one could help him. He could swim, yes, but he chose not to. Still, it didn't work. His body floated back up. It drifted until it hit a ship. Someone saw him. They pulled him out. Another time, he tried using a knife. All he got was a small cut on his neck. It healed quickly. There was no way out. Try to imagine what he felt. Picture a man who could not die. A man forced to live forever. The same days. The same lies. The same stories over and over. He was like Tantalus, the man from ancient myths, always wanting what he could never have. Except Rui didn't want food or drink. He wanted the grave. He begged the heavens for one thing, a grave. A place to rest. To sleep. The pain of the situation was deep enough on its own. I don't need to use fancy words or cry over it. Just telling the story is enough. After studying everything there was to study, after traveling the world and finding nothing new to excite him, after watching strange shows and curious sights like the man with cork boots or the wooden chess-playing doll, and others, Rui decided to return to Brazil. That was at the start of the 1800s, during the time when the king still lived there. Rui arrived in Rio de Janeiro, and his presence marked the beginning of something extraordinary. The city back then looked nothing like it does today. The Ouvidor Street wasn't yet the elegant avenue it would become, and the Rocio Square hadn't turned into the garden we know now. It was still the golden days of Vidigal and his grenadiers, whose legendary feats were so beautifully described by the late Dr. Manuel de Almeida, man of rare talent. Rui wanted to stay low. He moved through the city like a ghost, unnoticed and unknown. But a man of his wisdom and wealth could not remain in the shadows for long. It wasn't long before he was invited to the finest homes, and the most respected nobles at court competed for the honor of hosting him. He became a must-have guest at whist parties, a leading figure in the minuet, and a true connoisseur at the dining table. In short, he was the pride of high society. But this life of ease didn't last. After just 2 months, Rui returned to his old sorrows. That was when something happened, something that would change everything for him. Among the women who admired Rui's brilliance and charm was Dona Madalena de Sousa y Pedroiza. She was not only beautiful, but also noble in heart and character. Rui had always been drawn to women, which in a way made perfect sense. After all, what kind of immortality would it be if you grew tired of women? That would be worse than any hell, here or in the afterlife. He found Madalena enchanting. But while she respected him deeply, she did not return his love. A rejected heart often becomes the most stubborn of hearts. Rui, determined, turned up the charm, trying every romantic trick he knew to win her over. But Madalena remained untouched, always graceful, always polite and always out of reach. This struggle between them lasted nearly 2 years. One night, as Rui walked home, a man suddenly stepped in front of him and spoke. "Would you like to know why Dona Madalena refuses your hand?" the man asked. "I would," Rui replied. "She loves someone else." "That's impossible." Rui stood in the shadows near the garden wall, the cool night air pressing against his skin. Rain threatened to fall, dark clouds swallowing the moon whole. He had come alone, no servant, no lantern, just the knife hidden beneath his coat. The meeting place was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. He leaned closer to the wall, listening, waiting. It had all begun just the night before, when a mysterious figure showed up at the cajueros. The man's face had been half hidden by the flap of his cape, but when he finally pulled it back, Rui recognized him, Dona Martim, a relative of Madalena. Rui had borrowed a lantern from his servant and studied the man's face carefully. He knew right away that this was no ordinary visitor. Dona Martim had come with a message, and not a pleasant one. They had walked together toward Rui's house, not far from Valongo. Along the way, Dona Martim had spoken plainly. "Dona Madalena loves Licentiate Alvarez," he had said. "She wants to marry him. Her father won't allow it, and has even threatened to send her to a convent. That's why she won't accept your love." Rui had stopped walking for a moment, stunned. "But what the devil does she see in that man?" he asked. "I don't know," Dona Martim had replied. "But that's the truth." Rui had thought long and hard about what that meant for him. "So I'm wasting my time," he had said finally. "Just like I did," Dona Martim had answered. "I loved her too, but I never stood a chance. Alvarez turned her head completely. What can we do?" "Teach him a lesson," Rui had said. Dona Martim had winked, as if that was exactly what he had come to hear. "How do we do that?" "How?" Rui had echoed. "He talks to her in secret," Dona Martim explained. "Late at night. He comes to the gate, and she speaks to him from the window that overlooks the garden." "Enough said," Rui had replied. "What's your plan?" Dona Martim had asked, adjusting his cape. "Strangle him," Rui said coldly. "That could be dangerous," Dona Martim warned. "The police chief is no joke." "Police chief?" Rui had snapped. "Am I going to ask the chief for permission before I kill a scoundrel?" Dona Martim had left full of joy, while Rui had gone to bed thinking only of revenge. The next night, Rui did not visit Dona Madalena's house, as he usually did. Instead, he waited in the spot Dona Martim had shown him. The night was pitch black, heavy with the promise of a storm. Rui had brought no servant, no light, just the knife, and his anger. He pressed himself against the wall, heart pounding, and waited for the hour of revenge to strike. Rui de Leão waited a long time. Time always feels long when you're waiting for something. Finally, he heard footsteps coming from far away. At the same time, Madalena opened her window and appeared in it, like Juliet waiting for Romeo and his ladder. This was the moment. Rui pressed himself against the wall and waited. The lucky man he hated was getting closer, carefully stepping forward. Just as the poor lover started to speak, Rui jumped out and stabbed him in the stomach with a long knife. The licentiate let out a soft cry and tried to whisper Madalena's name. Then he fell. Rui quickly left the scene. The next morning, the police arrived. They picked up the body and did the necessary exams. Then they started asking questions to find out who had done this. At first, they suspected Madalena's father, because everyone knew he was against her marrying the licentiate. But when the father saw the law pointing at him, he said maybe it was someone else. He told them about a man who also loved Madalena. This man was handsome, educated, and known all over town. The father refused to believe Rui could do such a thing. His reaction was so strong and honest that Rui felt deep gratitude for him. Still, the justice system had to check everything. So they called for Rui de Leão. When he arrived, he immediately denied any crime. But they searched his house and found the bloody knife. Rui had forgotten to clean it or throw it away, a terrible mistake. The servants were questioned and admitted that their master had left the house late at night, without his servant, wrapped in a cloak, hiding something. Everything pointed to Rui as the killer. The king's justice took him into custody. A formal trial began, and after some time, Rui de Leão was sentenced to die by hanging. Madalena, who had at first felt relieved to see him arrested and put on trial, now felt pity when she heard he would be hanged. Rui knew it was her fault. She was the reason he was going to die. To the young woman, Rui looked like a man worth saving, so much so that she would have given him her hand in marriage, if it meant sparing him from the gallows. Poor Rui. The day of his execution had been set. The gallows rose high in the Moura Square, and the procession left the jail with the judge, the priest, the executioner, and the town crier. The drums beat solemnly at the front, and at every corner, the town crier read the sentence aloud. Rui walked behind, receiving the priest's final words of comfort the executioner could never offer. A huge crowd gathered in the square, but who do you think stood among the spectators? Dona Martim, paler than death itself, torn between guilt and a twisted curiosity. He was the indirect cause of the crime, and now he feared what Rui might say in his final moments. He wanted to hear them, to know if his name would be spoken. Rui climbed the steps of the gallows calmly. He stepped into place, opened his mouth to speak, but the sound of the drums drowned his voice. Then, without delay, the executioner did what the law gave him the right to do in the name of the gospel, and Rui's body hung from the rope. Little by little, the crowd left, shaken by what they had seen. For days, in every pharmacy and barbershop in town, people talked of nothing but Rui's crime. When night fell, the executioner and his assistant came to take the body down. The rope was cut, and the body hit the ground with a thud. "Ah," Rui said, dazed from the fall. "What was that?" asked the assistant. "I don't know. Sounded like a dog's moan." They moved closer to the body. But imagine their shock when Rui calmly began to untie the knot around his neck and said, "Take me to an inn. I'm hungry." The executioner and his assistant heard only those words, "take me," and saw Rui move as if nothing had happened. They turned and ran as fast as they could. The whole city was thrown into chaos. All anyone could talk about was the hanged man who had come back to life. He was innocent, some people shouted. "He's a saint," others said. Meanwhile, the man who had nearly been hanged calmly looked for something to eat and a place to sleep. He walked slowly through the streets, still shaken but trying not to show it. His eyes, though tired, searched for a familiar face, someone who might help. The crowd had loved him a few hours ago, and now they seemed to love him even more, but in a different way. Before, they had cheered him as a criminal who dared to challenge the law. Now, they praised him as a holy man who had survived death itself. He didn't care much for their opinions. What he needed was bread, water, and rest. His body ached, his throat hurt, and his mind kept returning to the rope. He tried to push the memory away. There would be time to think later. For now, survival was enough. A woman offered him a piece of cheese and a cup of wine. He accepted without a word. Another man pointed him toward a small inn near the church. The rooms were simple, but clean. He paid with the few coins he had left and asked for silence. The innkeeper nodded and left him alone. Only then did he allow himself to sit and breathe deeply. The day had been long. The morning had brought shame, the afternoon had brought fear, and now, at last, there was a little peace. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, though the rope still danced in his dreams. Chapter 4. The incredible and mysterious resolution of the incident terrified Madalena's father. Superstition worked strongly in favor of Rui de Leon, and a few days later, he dared to appear at the girl's house and ask for her hand in marriage. The reader might expect Madalena to say numero, but Madalena said yes. Forgiven in advance for the crime he had committed, Rui married Madalena and hoped that, at the very least, he would enjoy a few years of happiness. But soon enough, the old boredom with life returned to him. Meanwhile, Dona Martim, unhappy with how things had turned out, explained the rival's resurrection in his own way. It was surely, he told an officer, a secret agreement between the accused and the executioner. The executioner gave him a weak noose, and the man managed to survive. But I saw the opposite, the officer replied. You saw wrong, Dona Martim insisted. He swore revenge on Rui. But how? He thought carefully, and came up with a solid plan. He began to build a closer friendship with Madalena's husband. It was a great pain and deep humiliation for him to see his rival next to the woman he still loved, no matter what had happened. But jealousy can endure anything. When he felt their friendship had grown strong and Rui no longer suspected him, Dona Martim decided to bribe one of Rui's servants. With enough money, he convinced the servant to help him commit murder. Rui had the habit of drinking a cup of tea 1 hour after dinner. One evening, when all three were sitting in the living room, Rui suddenly felt unwell. He had eaten too much, and his digestion was slow and painful. What else do you feel? Madalena asked. Nothing serious. I know the cure. Just bring the tea earlier next time. She gave the order, and the servant brought the cup of tea. Dona Martim looked at the servant, who gave him a small sign to show the poison was already in the cup. Anyone who looked closely at Dona Martim at that moment would have seen the triumph glowing in his eyes. Finally, he whispered to himself. Rui drank the tea calmly, spoke very little, lay back on the leather chair, and fell asleep. Madalena was alone with Donna Martin. "Madalena," he said. "What boldness is this?" she asked. "Boldness, numero listen to my still love you." Donna Martin does not seem to act like a gentleman. "Why not?" Donna Martin asked with a devilish smile. "Don't you see who is over there?" "Over where?" "Yes. There lies a corpse." "A corpse?" Madalena asked, her face turning pale. "Almost. In 10 minutes, he will be a corpse." "Explain yourself, Donna Martin, for heaven's sake." "Oh. Do you think I wouldn't have my revenge?" Donna Martin had lost control. He fell to his knees before Madalena, but she ran into the next room. Meanwhile, Rui woke up, yawned, stood up, and saw Donna Martin at the far end of the room. Donna Martin looked whiter than a sheet. "What's wrong with you, Donna Martin?" "Nothing," Donna Martin replied, not taking his eyes off his rival. "Well then, sir," said Rui, "the tea helped my digestion. I feel better now. Where is Madalena?" Madalena had heard her husband's voice and ran into the room. Donna Martin waited for Rui to fall dead any second. He already regretted the words he had said to Madalena. Madalena asked her husband how he felt. He replied that he was feeling much better. "I suggest we play something to pass the time. The night looks cold." "Will our cousin stay?" "I know, but..." "He'll stay for sure." They played late into the night, drank tea, and Rui did not die as Donna Martin had expected. "It must have been that servant, the scoundrel," thought Donna Martin. But the servant was just as surprised. He looked at Donna Martin, unable to explain what had happened. When Donna Martin left the house, he was joined by his accomplice, who swore he had added the agreed amount of poison to the tea. But then, what happened? "I don't know, sir. I think it might have been a gunshot." "And you promise to help me with this plan?" "I promise." "Fine. Well, go for the gunshot next." The invincible Rui de Leão was ambushed again. The attack happened on Rua do Piolho during a stormy night, when the street was emptier than the Sahara Desert. His servant, armed with a musket, fired a shot straight into Rui's face. But Rui simply sneezed, as if the bullet were nothing more than a speck of dust, and kept walking calmly down the street. The servant fainted on the spot. Rui knew that Donna Martin had been plotting against him for some time. She had tried everything to get rid of him, but he felt safe thanks to the tribal healer's potion. He wasn't afraid of traps or poison. What truly worried him, though, was the thought of betrayal from his wife. But Madalena had been the perfect woman, devoted, loving, and faithful. Even after the honeymoon had long passed, her love for him burned just as bright. That's why his happiness didn't last. Madalena fell ill with a sudden and severe case of pneumonia. "What?" Rui cried out in despair. "Am I to watch everyone I love die before my eyes, while I keep living this cursed life?" Her funeral was grand and richly arranged, fitting for the wife of such a wealthy man. Rui, heartbroken and unable to bear the place where his beloved had died, decided to leave Brazil. He traveled to Europe in 1825, but not before making it clear that he would always consider himself Brazilian. Dona Martim left for Angola, where she eventually died of sorrow and regret. Years passed. In 1835, Rui de Leão returned to Rio de Janeiro once more. This time, he had no plans to travel again. He would stay there until the end of time, waiting for the day of judgment. He found the city buzzing with political talk. There was no shop or cafe where people weren't arguing about the latest news. Names were tossed around like coins, and politicians were praised or cursed depending on which party they belonged to. It's hard to spend time around politics without catching the fever that burns inside politicians. Besides, Rui had never tried this kind of distraction before. Science, love, and gambling had all failed to give his restless mind the kind of excitement it craved. To understand Rui's state of mind, imagine how dull a day can feel when you have absolutely nothing to do. Rui de Leão didn't just live his days, she stretched them, twisted them, turned each one into a test of endurance. Multiply one single day by eternity, and you might get close to understanding the torment this truthful man endured. Chosen by fate to show what boring immortality feels like, he moved through life like someone stuck in a story that never ends. Politics, at least, gave him something to hold on to. It matched exactly what he wanted. As soon as he started talking with leaders from one of the political parties, he realized it was a game that could last 30, maybe 40 years. At least he thought, I'll spend this time feeling a little more at peace until I find something better than politics to fill my days. He wasted no time. He started a newspaper called The Dawn. Its mission was as unclear as the soft light before sunrise. One of its clearest statements read, "We will gather every possible force for growth in support of freedom. We will build real order from the hopes of the people. We will turn stillness into action. This is the goal of independent journalism, and it is mine." Readers liked the sound of that. But The Nation's Cry, the rival paper, hit back with a sharp question. Where exactly did our colleague see that true, strong, unshakable freedom can hold on to ideas and plans that destroy the dust of the recent past, while still standing firm and proud? That was how the big argument began. It was loud, it was long, and it would have gone on even longer if death hadn't ended both papers within a few months. It treats everyone the same, after all, people and newspapers alike. Friends and enemies both noticed Rui's talent for writing. He had exactly what it takes to survive in political journalism. While The Dawn was alive, The Nation's Cry struggled to keep up. But not for long. Rui's paper didn't last much longer than its rival. Still, his party saw promise. They waited for the right moment to put him forward as a candidate in one of the provinces. That moment came not long before the newspaper shut down for good. The local leaders agreed to support his candidacy. They saw something in him: a fighter, a thinker, a man who could turn words into weapons and silence into noise. The morning paper hailed his arrival as the dawn of a brilliant political career, because the Honorable Rui de Leão was, plain and simple, a man out of Plutarch's pages. Who is this Rui de Leão? Some people asked. I don't know, others replied, but it seems he's a great man. It does seem so. Wherever his name came up, people immediately expressed high hopes for him. If he walked by, folks would point him out as a great statesman, another Pitt or Pombal. So, even before stepping foot in Parliament, our Rui de Leão already had a solid reputation. If he died tomorrow, he'd leave behind a legacy like a saint's. But how could an immortal man die so soon? he was elected. Readers, I'm sure you'll forgive me for not describing the scene when this illustrious doctor entered the old chamber. He was greeted and hugged by friends, watched with suspicion by enemies. Ruy de Leon was the man of the hour, the mystery whose words would shape the future. Whenever a representative spoke, they would gently mention the editor of Alvarada, calling him one of the most important men in the country and in the house. Loud cheers followed these fair words. For about 30 days, though, the new voice of the nation stayed silent. This worried his friends, who believed a man so gifted with the pen must surely have a powerful voice. His opponents, who shared the same belief, welcomed his silence and secretly hoped it would never end. One day, however, in the middle of a noisy session, Ruy de Leon stood up and asked for the floor. A deep silence fell at once. Members of the House gathered close around the speaker. The people in the gallery leaned forward to miss nothing. Even the president, cupping his hand behind his ear, got ready to hear the parliamentary debut of Alvarada's editor. Humble and calm in tone, Ruy de Leon began his speech like this. Mr. President, I'm one of the humblest and least qualified people this country has sent to represent it, not support it. Mr. President, I look around me and see the nation's finest minds. Not only among my allies, but even among my opponents. Well said. Because, gentlemen, when I see talent, I recognize it, and I respect differing opinions. Sensation in the chamber. I am worth nothing. Many voices. Not supported. Mr. X, you're worth a lot. The speaker, I'm worth nothing. But I feel in myself the strength to help build this nation's greatness, not as the architect who designs the plan, but as the worker who carries the bricks. Applause. Now then, gentlemen, what has the government done to build this great house? Where are its plans? What materials does it have? And with which workers does it count? We see none of this. Clinging to their offices, the honorable ministers only enjoy the pleasures of power, frivolous pleasures, unworthy of citizens from a great nation. Instead of dedicating themselves fully, at all times and with all their strength, to developing the legacy they receive, these gentlemen, that legacy they must one day pass on to our children. At this point, there was such a loud outburst of protests and applause that the speaker had to stop for a while, and the president had to ring the bell. But that bell was almost useless in the parliament, because when everyone is shouting, a bell has little moral power to calm the storm. Once the noise finally died down, after a few sharp words were exchanged, the speaker continued. From that moment on, nothing like it had ever been seen before, because Ruy de Leon's eloquence swept away both friends and enemies alike. Everyone hung on the words of this new Demosthenes. I can't resist the urge to quote from secret memoirs, since official records don't include Rui's speeches. Closing words from that famous speech. Here they are. Gentlemen, I have lived a long life, and I know men and things deeply. The science of nations is not just empty talk. I've studied it in the works of great statesmen and through my own understanding of events. That great and immortal Catathas, the man I look up to. He is to me the perfect example of political honesty, the model for every patriot, the comfort for lost causes. The teacher of nations, the fear of tyrants, the mirror for every citizen here, the pride of humanity. The symbol of a fallen past, and the hope of a rising future. Applause, you might say, gentlemen. That I should follow Cato's example and end my life? No. 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 I won't do it. No, I couldn't. Would the truth really be lost forever if I did? I see sitting in those ministerial chairs men who betray their duties. Men who would sell their conscience for a bowl of lentils, whispers. But gentlemen, let's not fool ourselves. To be like Cato, one must stand up to the tyranny of Caesar. But where is Caesar today? Is there anyone among our enemies who can truly be called a Caesar? Listen, listen. Let us rest easy then. Let's not follow an example that would bring only disaster. The truth is safe, as long as we and the opposition have the strength and unity needed to defeat these briefcase-toting politicians. Applause, gentlemen. I will now bring this to a close. The Hebrews crossed the desert, guided by a column of fire. We are the Hebrews of politics. The column of fire is the truth, and there, in those ministerial seats, lies the promised land. Sound the trumpets of honesty, march forward with the army of willpower, take up the sword of determination, and they shall fall. Those men will become political corpses, for, gentlemen, the distance between a dying man and a corpse is very small indeed. This grand and unforgettable speech, one that professors should hand down to their rhetoric students, made a huge impact in the chamber. The ministers tried to reply, but it was impossible. Rui stood at the center of attention, basking in the glow of admiration. Men of all ranks and parties praised him. The very next day he received an invitation to a banquet hosted by the Chamber of Deputies in honor granted without regard to political lines. "What a speech!" one man exclaimed. "A masterpiece." Has another Mirabeau? No, has Cicero reborn. We've never heard anything like it. Has the new Demosthenes. Brazilian eloquence has finally arrived. These were the words on everyone's lips, both in the streets and inside the chamber, as they spoke of Rui de Leão's unforgettable address. Even at the banquet held in his honor, the famous orator amazed the guests with a brilliant toast. Looking around the room at friends and foes alike, he said something so unforgettable that it would live as long as his name. "I am here like the dead in a cemetery. The earth and this meal erase all differences. The stomach is impartial." It would take too long to list all of Rousseau's rhetorical triumphs, or to describe the great services he offered his party. It's enough to say that, not long after, he became the party's leader and was universally recognized as the greatest figure in Parliament. But soon, he grew tired of politics and public life. When his term ended, Rui announced he would step away from the spotlight and return to private life. Deputies and supporters flooded his home, walking miles, their shoes worn thin, just to beg him to reconsider. "No," he said, "but we need you. I won't change my mind. Please, for the love of God." "I cannot." He left for the northern provinces and vanished from public view. There, he dragged through days filled with boredom and unhappiness. Then one day came the news. War had broken out against the dictator Lopez. Without hesitation, Rui enlisted as a captain of volunteers and headed south. He fought with extraordinary courage, placing himself in the line of fire, as if chasing death itself. But death would not take him. One afternoon, as he walked beyond the camp's edge, he met a Paraguayan officer. The man stood tall, his voice steady. "Sir," he said, "I am your enemy. Kill me." The Paraguayan fired a shot, but it missed, causing no harm. Rui's men rushed in, captured the man, and brought him to the camp. Broken and full of despair, the man later returned to court and stayed there. And it was around this time that the final event took place, the one I will now explain to finish this story. Rui became close with a homeopathic doctor named Alvaro Mello. The man was a true expert in his field, and Rui loved talking with him about medicine. One day, during a visit to Bernadette's house, Rui said to Dr. Alvarez, "I've never really understood the idea behind homeopathy." "Why not?" "It feels contradictory to me." "It's not," Alvarez replied. "Even the greatest minds in traditional medicine have written ideas that support homeopathy. I still think it's just clever talk." "No, it's not. Let me show you." Alvarez began to explain the homeopathic system in detail. He gave many examples. He spoke calmly and with knowledge because he truly understood what he was saying. Rui was clearly moved by the explanation. When he got home, he studied homeopathy with the same deep focus he always used when he wanted to master something. Soon he was convinced. And what did he say then? "Tupa, you are everything, yet you made a mistake. You gave me immortality, but also gave the world homeopathy. Now I defeat you with your own weapon. Similia similibus curantur, like cures like. You are beaten." He drank the rest of the shaman's potion. The next day he died. This is how the great man's life ended. He had lived for nearly 3 centuries, winning honors in war, in science, and in politics. He was lucky in games and in love, always favored by fortune. In the end, he proved clearly that death is not an evil, but a needed relief from the boredom of life. Let us follow his example in bravery and love of study, but not in the wish to live forever. And let us believe that the best potion for immortality is worth nothing compared to the 7 feet of earth in Kaju. The end.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.